Hey everyone, Scott Figgins here, Wellness Captain with Mesa Fire Medical Department. We wanted to introduce you to some new legislation and kind of expose you to an interview that took place at Year's End 2020 with Senator Paul Boyer. So for those of you who don't know, Senator Boyer was instrumental in actually creating our presumptive cancer law. So if you really want to get into the weeds of this law, it's Arizona Revised Statute 23-901.01. You can look it up, just azleg.gov. It introduces 21 different cancers that were supposed to be presumptive for us. Unfortunately, as we've seen over the years, the presumption wasn't always presumed to be. And there was specific language within that revised statute that cities and insurance companies and the Industrial Commission of Arizona were focusing on that were generating denials and creating significant obstacles for us. So as a result, Senator Boyer put together the Senate Ad Hoc Committee, and through that, we received different recommendations. We have a report that we'll be sending out on a link, along with this video that covered an interview that we had with Senator Boyer. But long story short, we've been working round the clock, our legislators, Paul Boyer, tons of people, Vincier Cancer Center and Dr. Shukla, Dr. Jeff Burgess. It's been a ton of people working on this project to change legislation to basically exclude this specific language that has been the focal point for all these organizations on the denials. You're going to be seeing this video here. This is an interview with Senator Paul Boyer. We're talking specifically about the bill. We're talking about the fact that it did not pass due to COVID. And once you see this, you'll get a better understanding of kind of what's taken place over these last few years.
In 2019, you helped form the Senate Ad Hoc Committee on minimizing contaminant risk and exposure for first responders. What prompted the creation of this committee?
Just educating members and also the community on the risk that firefighters take day in and day out, and that the exposures that they have with toxins and particulates, that it stays with them unless there's significant cleanup afterwards, which Mesa in particular has been fantastic as far as mitigating.
The research that we're doing, again, in partnership with fire departments, and realize again that some of the stuff we were doing, like the washdown, I think that came out of Washington State, right? I mean, so these are things that the fire services come up with. It's all of us working together to figure out ways of reducing exposure. That's an important point. And then I would just say that it's important when you do those things to make sure that the things you're doing are effective and not harmful in some way. So that's where the research comes in. But when you have that, it's a really powerful combination. And then you can use it to do things like help support firefighter cancer presumptive laws and actually help to prevent exposures as well.
Yeah, I mean, my goal was to make sure that all the experts got into the room, which for the most part, everybody was there. And then in particular, Dr. Burgess, because he's been doing some great research down at the University of Arizona. And so just making sure that his research is now disseminated to the public. And so that did occur. Unfortunately, due to COVID, we didn't get the ultimate outcome through, which was cancer presumption laws, at least the law fixed. But we're hopeful that with the work that we did then, we'll carry over into this upcoming legislative session.
The final report that came out from the Senate Ad Hoc Committee there provides countless recommendations, really kind of across the board, from how to take care of yourself at the station, on the fire truck, after a fire. Were there any recommendations that stood out to you that were kind of presented as, whether Mesa was doing it, Tucson was doing it, Phoenix was doing it? Was there anything that stood out that was kind of shocking, or that was maybe that's a no-brainer, but why isn't everybody doing it?
Yeah, so nothing so much shocking, but yeah, more on the why isn't everybody doing it side, where having 2 sets of turnouts, having clean cabs, decontaminating after every single exposure, making sure that engineers are also wearing SCBAs, the breathing, while they're doing their own thing, just because we saw with Dr. Burgess' research, that surprised me particular, that they are at higher risk, even more so than some of the other firefighters.
And for the engineers who aren't going into the burning structure, at least not very often, we put them on air. So there was engineers on air. They were wearing their own SCBA, and that also reduced exposures by about a third. So even though they weren't, maybe in the smoke when the fire started, as I had previously said, you can't see all the chemicals in the air. I mean, just because it's not smoky doesn't mean they're not there. And of course, the wind can change direction. So these are two things chosen by Tucson Fire Department, both shown to be effective by our research studies, and that's become now part of their SLPs.
All right, so you brought up Senate Bill 1160. So it passed the Senate 25-4.
Mhm.
And my understanding is it went to the House Rules Committee in May. Did it ultimately get voted down?
Yeah, so if it was going to pass, it would have passed at the end of the legislative session, which was in March. And so the Arizona Constitution says that every bill needs to be heard, if you will. And so that really was just more of a procedural maneuver, that it was heard in rules, but that didn't mean that actually they intended on moving the bill.
Okay.
And so because it's died, we're not like the US Congress where it can carry over into the next year. We actually have to start from scratch.
All right, so what is the plan then? Are you planning on creating a new bill? Is it going to have different language?
Yeah, so I just need to talk to a few of the guys to see what the best strategy is for next year. And I'm all ears. I'm ready to go.
Do you know what it was? Was there any specific thing, or was it a conglomerate of things that caused it to fail?
Well, I think it was a few things, but I mean, COVID really screwed up everything.
Yeah.
I mean, there were, I think, 100 bills left that died. In fact, we were working on a proposal that would have created a high risk insurance pool for firefighters at the end of session. And that ended up dying. That was only a budget ask. That wasn't even a change in the policy side. And we couldn't get that through just because we couldn't really get anything through except for the skinny budget that ultimately passed.
One of the big counterpoints for people who didn't want this bill to pass was that it was going to create a significant monetary commitment by the state. And one of those elements that you had looked at, I think, was Ohio. And they had passed with a department larger than ours, or firefighters that were more numerous than us for Ohio. And they only had a $5 million commitment. Was that something that was easily, I guess, argued, or did that seemingly come up over and over and over? Because I know that's the point of contention across the state.
Yeah, we testified that in committee numerous times, but that doesn't mean that the opposition was willing to accept it. And so even if I literally presented the figures in front of them from the actuarial studies or whatever it was where we got that data from, they still wouldn't have accepted it more than likely. But it doesn't mean that I'm not going to try again next year.
Fantastic. All right. Do you think that there's going to be any differences in this bill? I know one of the things that was very specific was irrefutable, so that the presumption is actually what we intended it to be in the 2017 bill. It was going to be presumed. So there was some language that was struck out, specifically trying to correlate a cancer to the chemical to the cancer that you had. That language was struck out to say irrefutable. Are you still gonna try to have that language in it?
We're talking to the attorneys right now. I think they're looking at some different options. There's one option where we just get rid of the term reasonable relation, because that's been the hang up, where you've got the attorneys on the other side saying, oh, okay, so I don't deny that you've been in 50 fires, just tell us what fire caused your cancer.
Right.
That's how they can get around it with the language reasonable relation.
Are we still going to try to include the fire investigators?
Absolutely. That's right.
What can firefighters and others do to help support any new bills coming forward for public safety, for the state, for presumptive cancers?
Find out who their two state reps and one state senator is, and reach out to them early and often. Respectfully, of course, but just share personal stories, because that's what goes the longest way, and make sure that they know that you're a constituent.
How impactful do you believe it is for firefighters and other members of public safety to show up in support, just like we did for the Senate Ad Hoc Committee.
It's huge. I mean, it makes all the difference when you've got 100 firefighters in the room. I mean, members pay attention to that. And they also, though, they do need the personal contact, though, from their constituents. So go on the azleg.gov website, look up find out who my representative is, and then call the number, ask for an appointment through because you'll get an assistant, and that's fine. I mean, we'll have assistants, and they take the calls. But do see if you can make a personal appointment and then start sending the emails and just introduce yourself, share your story. I'm sure that you know somebody who's been impacted by cancer, and just make sure that they know that you're a constituent and that you care about this issue and that you're going to be, watching this as it progresses through the legislature in 2021. Just that personal touch, and I know I've harped on it, but it really does make a huge difference. And so please don't watch this without going online, finding who your 2 state reps and your state senator is, and reach out to them, even if it's just a quick email. I mean, I think we're moving in the right direction as far as mitigation is concerned. And now if we can just wrap it up with getting good policy through, that we'll be in a good spot.
Absolutely. Hey, as always, thank you so much. I greatly appreciate your time. I'm sure that everybody else who watches this will as well.
Well, thank you. Take care.
Take care.
As of April 2021, here's where we stand. New legislation is sitting on Doug Ducey's desk. In fact, Senator Boyer and the committee, basically, those that have been instrumental in this Arizona presumptive cancer, they took a tactic that is kind of unheard of. They submitted the same bill to both the House and the Senate. This helped to expedite the process. Long story short, passed both, and that bill is now sitting there. Here's what we want to highlight for everybody. Some significant changes that ultimately benefit the fire service and the surrounding communities that we serve. Very first thing is it strikes out language that have been a focal point for insurance companies, cities, Industrial Commission of Arizona, that ultimately have resulted in numerous denials of firefighters with presumptive cancers. That language being struck out is pretty significant. What we hope is it will expedite the process and it will no longer create the hurdles that we've experienced and ultimately the denials that many firefighters who sustain cancer have seen. In addition to that, it adds breast cancer and ovarian cancer, which is a huge win as we start to see more women in the fire service. And so this is pivotal in that regard. So another thing that's been instrumental with a fix of this bill and hopefully legislation and the law is this bill now includes fire investigators. So if you look at the bill, it's 23-901.09. It now is specific to firefighters and fire investigators. The 901.01 is specific to peace officers. So we've completely separated it. We've cleaned up language. But most importantly, we're including those fire investigators who are in for hours on end after the fire, doing their investigation and being exposed to these same chemicals that we're being exposed to. So these are all huge wins. There's a couple other articles in there, a couple other changes to different laws, I think 6 overall. But these are huge wins, and we couldn't have done this without our legislators, without our firefighters, without Mesa really having the opportunity to showcase clean cab concept and present at the Senate Ad Hoc Committee for minimizing contaminant risk to firefighters, along with Tucson and the firefighters who've actually had cancer and Phoenix Fire and just everybody involved, Dr. Jeff Burgess and Dr. Shukla. So huge win for all of us. This is the latest that we know. One of the things that we want to point out is we have a huge support and backing from our community. So be cognizant of that as we're rolling our trucks and serving with care.